Sit back and let me tell you the story of how I managed to troll a desperate African dictator in his last days of dictating, before he managed to skip off to Equatorial Guinea with the country's entire treasury in two disappointingly small suitcases. Firstly, a little bit of context. In 2016, I was living in Sunderland. Now, like most people in Sunderland with a brain, all three of us, I was bored. And I became aware of this rather unusual gentleman in his robes and his magic wand, who was at the time running Gambia, having staged a coup in 1994. Meet Yahya Abdul Aziz Jemus Junking Jammy, or as he is known to his followers, and I'm not making this up, Lord Commander of all the bridges and protector of all the fishies. Yeah, really. No, Jammy has a few talents. He's got a few skills. You see, in his magic wand, he's got some magic herbs. And with these magic herbs, he can cure Ebola, diabetes and cancer, only on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and dependent on Allah's will. Now, Jammy's not very fond of the LGBT community, so Jammy doesn't extend this generous curing nature to those, but we'll come to that a little bit later on. Now, to say that Jammy is slightly anti-LGBT is putting it mildly. In February 2014, he said that LGBT stood for, you ready for this? Leprosy, gonorrhea, bacteria, and tuberculosis. Yes, really. Harsh stuff. Now, Jammy followed this up by advising that all gay people, he doesn't mind lesbians, but all gay people should run or have their throats slit. Yeah. Now, there's a little minor problem with this when your entire economy depends on peanuts and penises. Yes, the pink Delassie pound dollar, whatever he was using. Oh dear. Yeah. Now, to give you some form of idea of just how batshit our friend is, I saw an interview with him once where he was telling a slightly incredulous journalist how he'd invented airports, or rather Gambia had invented airports. Apparently he was flying over West Africa and he needed to come home and he couldn't land because there was nowhere for the plane to land. So he looked out the window and he thought about it and he asked Allah, and clearly Allah was in a good mood with him again, because they came up with the idea together that they would build some concrete, and it would be a large piece of concrete where planes could land, and we'll call it an airport. Jammy then followed this up by declaring that the first man on the moon was indeed Gambian, which was news to Neil Armstrong. Now, fast forward to 2016, and Jammy decided to call an election. Jammy wasn't too worried about this election. You see, in the previous election, Jammy had managed to win something like 98.5%. Even the dead were rising from their graves to vote for him. There were more people voting for Jammy than there were citizens in the country. It was all very odd. Jammy was obviously extremely well loved. The only problem is here, Jammy hadn't really considered his new opponent, Adama Barrow. Now, Mr. Barrow had spent most of his working life as a security guard and Argos in London. And whatever it was Barrow had, the public liked it, and they liked it more than Jammy. Jammy was rather shocked to find himself on 12%, so something had to be done. This is Adama not looking very cheerful, which was probably understandable, really. So, Jammy's on 12%. What do? Do you smear the entire campaign and tell everyone he's gay? Well, no, he's got about 26 wives, so that wouldn't work. So, we take a pot shot at him? Yeah, we miss. Do we pull a Mugabe and send him driving off down the wrong side of the road towards a large oil truck? Yes, we miss. So, Jammy sends him into exile. Adama goes tearing off to Senegal, where he hides, Unfortunately, Ade-the-Gaymer carries on with his presidential campaign. This is something that Jammeh hadn't really considered. He's running his campaign from Senegal and he's winning. So what do? Election night comes around, and despite help from Allah, and despite help with all the magic wands and the curing of Ebola, diabetes and cancer only on Tuesdays and Saturdays, Jammeh loses. So what do you do when you've lost? What you do is you hold yourself up in the presidential palace with some pizzas, throw a major strop and refuse to go. Now, you wanted a war with Senegal for years, despite the fact that Senegal could crush you in about 20 seconds flat. But the rest of the neighbours are also hanging around outside. So we've got Ghana and Nigeria just off your little bit of coast. Cote d'Ivoire's there. Sierra Leone is making threats at you. Liberia is telling you really should be thinking about moving on. But you're holed up in the palace. You've got all your wives. Except you then discover that some annoying little troll in Sunderland has added your wife on Facebook pretending to be you. And she's having a discussion with this troll about what she's going to cook for your dinner. This is not what you need right now. So you get your followers, you encourage your followers to send threatening messages to this troll. Unfortunately, this troll happens to have a large yellow wolfhound who would take your magic wand and probably chew it, absent-mindedly in a sort of friendly way, but he'd still eat your magic wand. So that is the story of how I managed to troll Yahya Jammeh. I set up a Facebook profile as him and I added his wives. Now, I was not expecting his wives to actually accept the ad. One of them did. And we had a great discussion about what we were going to be doing, what we were going to be having for tea that night, while holed up in the presidential palace. In case you wondered what happened to the hero of our story, Equatorial Guinea decided to allow him to go into exile there, where he still is to this day. He decided to take the country's entire treasury with him, as I mentioned earlier, in 2 depressingly small suitcases, leaving Adama Barrow to run the country on about £2.50.